Okay, hello everyone. Um, our regular Monday night class, and we'll start. Join palms, bow. Four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Hello to you all. We're going to continue on with the masters that we'd been talking about, the Chan masters, and this spotlight today is going to be on the master Dongshan, and from the, I believe that would be around the 8th century, and Master Dongshan was credited with writing the precious mirror of samadhi, sometimes the precious jeweled mirror of samadhi. This is a poem that is very important in terms of the study of and practice of Chan, because it relates to a viewpoint of someone who has already realized their self-nature and has become enlightened. And so it is from that viewpoint that this poem is written. In some ways, the poem is difficult for us to understand because we do not have that same viewpoint. But it is the viewpoint that we emphasize in terms of using the mind's own perception to see things rather than the perception from the samsaric five skandha. And when it's reviewed or studied in this context, it makes more sense than if we did it the other way, because otherwise it seems to be kind of contradicting in terms of it. But one of the things that's very interesting in terms of the practice of Chan is that Chan presents many times where there appears to be contradictions that seem to be irreconcilable in our studies. And we just look at it. And if we try to tell somebody that's not a Chan practitioner about it, they'll just say, well, that's just absolute nonsense. And in the samsaric viewpoint, it is absolute nonsense. It cannot be understood in this way, nor can it actually even be spoken of. But we do so anyway because of the fact that should we not speak, then there's no way of understanding that there is nothing to learn or nothing to attain. We need to communicate this, but it's a delicate balance of us veering off onto some kind of an intellectual understanding versus no understanding at all and no clue in terms of it. Then the only meaning that would be there for a practitioner would be one of just simply a devotional practice. The devotional practice is not bad, but it is not right view. And we, as we begin to practice more and more, we find that there's room for devotional practice as well as the practice of right view. In devotional practice, what I mean is a practice in which it gives deep respect to the Buddhas, and we hold that ideal to a very high esteem, and we perform certain services and functions to give respect to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Right view takes that and says, yes, that's proper to do that. However, we should not lose sight of the fact that this very mind that we use is the Buddha mind, and that what we are holding high for devotion is this very mind itself. And in that, all of a sudden, if one can make that turn and turn the mind's eye inward, then the contradictions break down, and all of a sudden one can see things in a different viewpoint. And it is from this viewpoint of this precious mirror of samadhi that this comes in, and the imagery that comes into play here in terms of how this master is explaining things and writing this down for us and saying, it's kind of like the view from Mars, not from us looking at the telescope and seeing it, but it's from Mars looking at us. And so we'll start with these little snippets, and then I'm going to go into the text in full, not completely. It's just too much material, and it's quite it's incredibly deep. You can read it, and you can read it on a very superficial level, but you get very little traction when reading it in that way. The only way you can really get to it is by studying it deeply, but it is not something that gives up its wisdom so easily because it's written in a different language than we're used to understanding. And that language is, as I've mentioned before, is in the esoteric language. It's not intended to be understood by words. So here's a few snippets from it. It says, turning away and touching are both wrong. So turning away and touching, meaning we turn away from phenomena or we touch phenomena, they're both wrong. But on the other hand, we could say that they're both right. Therein lies a contradiction right from the very beginning, because if we are turning away from something or we're touching it, if there's the idea of a subject or an object that I am turning away or I am touching this, then that is wrong in terms of how we approach it, because it's from the samsaric side. On the side of a person that has realized the nature of mind, that isn't necessarily incorrect, but it is not the self that is turning away or touching things. And it need not turn away or it need not touch anything, because it's already the body of the Buddha. For it is like a massive fire. Just to depict it in literary form, just to write something about it, is to stain it with defilement. It is bright just at midnight. So this is very interesting, because it's talking about that it is bright at midnight, meaning that it is not something in terms of illumination that requires some kind of a sensory light. It is like a blind person able to navigate through a room does not need light to be able to do that. They develop their senses to be able to sense those things. The same thing with mind. Mind, it doesn't rely on the illumination of artificial light at midnight. It's bright already, because it has nothing to do with the idea of a samsaric conception of light and dark. The illumination is illumination of mind that penetrates through everything, irregardless of whether one sees it in a samsaric light or not. This is a difference, because it's a different aspect of mind that is not present in the samsaric practice, where if the lights go off, then one is in the dark. But if the lights go off and one has the proper perception of mind, everything is still perfectly in its place. There's a limitation in terms of what one can navigate, but if one is familiar with the surroundings or their senses, they can still navigate. But it doesn't change things. When the light goes off, things don't disappear, or other things don't appear that weren't there, or we let our imagination run rampant with us. And so we could essentially say that the midnight that is being talked about is samsara, where we believe, oh, there's lights, there's a light on me shining, light shining from behind me. So this is illumination, but it's not the same kind of illumination that he's talking about. It is that this is midnight. But this very mind that's listening to me right now, all of your minds are just one, ekayana. And the single mind is illuminating everything, and it's bright. But we can't see that because we are in the midnight of this so-called existence. We can't see those things. And so then the next line says, it doesn't appear at dawn, which is very interesting, because when we see it and it says it is bright, but it is bright just at midnight, it does not appear at dawn. To me, this means that it's not something that appears with the rising of the sun. It is something that's always been there. And so, and a great amount of descriptions of realizations or enlightenment revolves around illumination of objects. And it's a difficult way because it's not an easy thing to do. And it's still using a big sledgehammer to drive in a nail. It's crude, but nevertheless, we use these kinds of notions of things so that people have an idea with these metaphors that there is some idea that they can kind of look at and see. But if we hold on to it, then that's where the danger is. So the danger is hanging on to something for too long and then having it turn into some kind of an intellectual exercise. It acts as a guide for beings, referring to mind now. Its use removes all pains. So when we use the mind in the proper way, it removes suffering. So when we talk about all pains, it is that, just as in the Heart Sutra said, there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path. So in this kind of an elevated understanding of the Four Noble Truths, it looks at things and says, these things are at this point illusory. They're part of mind, fundamentally empty, which is not easy for us to talk about. And one of these series of classes, I will talk about emptiness in more detail, because in order to understand emptiness, we can't just keep saying, well, it's empty. There's this very deep profoundness to this emptiness, and I wish we didn't have the word emptiness, because it doesn't really advance what emptiness is. Although it is not fabricated, which is unconditional, it is not without speech. Very interesting. So it says, yes, Santha, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I've been thinking of emptiness as empty fullness.
Empty fullness.
Just because the word itself has to confound. It should not be easily mistaken. And it's not just emptiness. Emptiness is not just emptiness.
Yeah, again, that goes to what Red Pine was talking about, that it is not the space between us, but the lack of space between us. And then which got me into something that I've been seeing on in many different sutras and commentaries, and it's driving me nuts. This word called uh, spacelessness. Now I got Michael to wake up. Um, Spacelessness. What the heck is spacelessness? I see this word and I'm going, wait, do you even know what you're writing down when you say spacelessness? What the heck is spacelessness? I mean, it it is one like you're saying there. So I'll give you that one cent, then drive you crazy with that one. In terms of it, because it's like, well, what does that mean? Spacelessness. There's no space. It's but it is in this way. I kind of a reverse engineering of Red Pine's comment of that the lack of space between things, and is probably the best way you could say it. Is that it isn't in that way, because and then it negates the idea of space itself as something. So that's your empty fullness that you were talking about. So it's interesting, and I'm taking the time to talk about these things because they do confound. They do present these kinds of conundrums that we it's difficult for us to to fathom, but that's where we work. That's right view work. Mind work is working in these kinds of things where there's a constant shifting, and there's no it would be like climbing up a mountain. And if you're one of these very experienced climbers and they look at the mountain and they go, wait a second, there's no toe holes here, there's no hand holes here, how am I going to climb that? And they go, just keep going, you can do it. But how am I going to do that? I don't have anything to hold on to. And that is where we do our best work, is by letting go of these conceptions. This is mind work. And so I want to talk about that because it fits exactly with what Dongshang's saying here. He's telling you this is how it works. And you can't, if you just talk about it right away, you're defiling it by talking about it. But he also recognizes that you have to talk about it. And we'll get to a little bit of what Master Sheng says about this poem as well in a few moments. So he says, although it's not fabricated, it is not without speech. So it is a function that we have to communicate. And it is just in that perfect saying of the one master that appeared to be a joke, where he told this young monk, actually, I have nothing to teach you. And the young monk says, well, why am I learning from you if you have nothing to teach me? And the master says, you learn from me until you realize I have nothing to teach you. It is in this way that we practice. And so by having this kind of an idea that there is nothing to attain, nothing to pick up, which is the Heart Sutra, right? But for some reason, we miss all that. We say, oh, form is empty, right? We never even concentrate on, hey, consciousness is empty. What do you mean consciousness is empty? That means that you don't really exist as a self. That self appears there, but it is not what it appears. It is not as you believe it to be, and you're clinging to what you believe to be that. It causes you to go through this endless cycle of samsara. Okay. And I'm purposely keeping it this way, kind of hitting you from all different angles, because that's what this Chan poem's doing. And it's beating you, but it's also a wonderful poem rejoicing in mind itself. But if you look at it from the samsaric side, you're going to take a beating. You're going to really get beat up by this thing because you're just going to go, oh, it sounds so beautiful. All these literary mentions, and we'll get to those in a moment. But I don't really understand what they're talking about. But this is mind work. This is what we do. So we don't have to go and try to cover like so many different treatises or whatever. We take our time. In the present moment, we practice, we study. So what I'm presenting to you, not a volume of work to study. What I'm presenting to you is the present moment to practice in. Okay, so we continue on. It is like facing a jewel mirror. Form and image behold each other. Now, we stop right there because what is he talking about? Form and image behold each other. Well, isn't that the same thing? Form and image behold each other. What form is he talking about? What image is he talking about? This doesn't make sense. And then he adds, you are not it. In case you were thinking you were one of those two, form or the image, you are not it. What? Now what are you talking about? In truth, it is you. In truth, it is you. What? The Buddha said not self. He didn't say not self-nature. This requires mind work to process this. This is not something that you get, it's not like you're buying donuts and you can pick a bunch of donuts out and then they hand you a box of donuts. If you do it this way, all you'll get is donut holes. And not the little round ones, but just the holes themselves. And you go, what's in the box? It's donut holes. What? Even the Beatles did something like that. They said talking about how many holes does it take to fill the Prince Albert Hall, right? What? What are we talking about? Holes. This is mind work. This is what this master is doing. He's lovingly presenting this to you, but he's not giving it to you. You got to work for it. Like a babe in the world, in 5 aspects complete. It does not come, it does not go or come, does not rise or stand. And then they use this word baba wawa. Is there anything said or not? And I think in the translation from Master Sheng, I think the term is po po ho ho. It might mean the same thing. I'm not sure. I tried to Google it and I couldn't find. Tori's saying, she's nodding her head. Do you know something I don't know about that term, po po ho ho? Anybody heard that before? Because I Googled it. I couldn't find, if it was some mystical way or it was just like a nonsense.
I was nodding only because your pronunciation is correct according to the the characters. That's all. I don't really know what it means. I think it's just making sounds. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe so. I like that one better than the Baba Wawa one. But in any case, it's saying, is there anything said or not? very interesting again. Is there anything said or not? Is anybody saying anything? Does the Buddha say anything? Well, the Buddha that was the appearance body then spoke, but did the Buddha really speak or not? Because if we say the appearance body was there, but yet that belongs to samsara. But also within that was the Buddha mind, the Buddha's intention. So is the Buddha's intention spoken? And is it, what channel is it on? And probably that's going to be on the esoteric channel. And for those who don't understand that, which are very few, then it would be on the profound channel. Okay. Ultimately, it does not apprehend anything because its speech is not yet correct. So it says it doesn't hold on to anything because its speech is not yet correct. When's it going to be correct? It's very interesting. It's actually loosening the bonds, but you believe you're being wrapped up even tighter. You don't understand that. So it's a very interesting thing in terms of how it's approached. With causal conditions, time and season, quiescently it shines bright. So quiescently it shines bright. So with these causal conditions, times and seasons, and as we're talking here, causal conditions and times and seasons belong to the samsara. But the mind shines bright. It is not those things, but it's not separate from those things. And we'll get into that in a moment. And hopefully Master Sheng will help you a lot tonight. Okay. In its fineness, it fits into spacelessness. There's that word. In its fineness, it fits into spacelessness. Is there enough room? Sure. We got plenty of room. I don't see any space. Well, that's why we have plenty of room, because it's spacelessness. Everything can fit. What? You're talking nonsense. You already have 12 clowns in the car already. How can you fit another one? They'll all fit. It's spacelessness. How do you think Vilamakruti fit all the entourage of Manjusri into his little room? And they said all of those people that came to visit Vilamakruti from Manjusri's entourage did not expand the city in which they were in. Not one bit. How is that? Because it's spacelessness. What? It's a different language. It's very, very incredible. This is Chan. This is Buddha Dharma. I'm not making this up. This is where this all goes to. We have such a great opportunity to listen to the profound Dharma. And I bet you've read the Precious Mirror Samadhi before and never understood any of this or never delved into the deepness of this. This is where we go with all of this. The more you study, the more you practice, the more you realize how much you don't know. And all of a sudden you start realizing that these masters are talking on such a different level than what we're at. But we via mind work, we can get there. So it says, in its fineness, it fits into spacelessness. In its greatness, it is utterly beyond location. We always see the the sutras, especially of Manjusri, are the dwelling place of Manjusri. And where does Manjusri dwell? Where does he not dwell? But by not dwelling, it's spacelessness. It is just in this way. He dwells in your heart. A hair's breadth deviation will fail to accord with the proper attunement. So here he's saying, be careful. Be careful. If you're off by a little bit, you're going to mess this all up. It is why in the Mindwork forum, I'm very, very careful of what's there and what people say. And if you say something, I have to point out something in terms of if you misunderstood, even if it's just the tiniest one. Sometimes people may perceive that to be me nitpicking or trying to put you into your place. I don't want you to put you into a place. I want you to put you into the abode of Manjusri. But I can only do that if you start breaking down the, conceptions and conditions and notions and things. And when I see that, then I have to point it out. And when you see that in other people's writings, it is either that they're very loose in how they do that, undisciplined, or they're not well versed enough to be able to understand the difficulties. That's why I try to keep mind work as pristine as possible, so that you can work with this and see. It's not easy. And again, we've got time. We'll go into what Master Sheng talked about this, but that's the most important part. If you're here, it's saying if you're off by a little bit, you're off by quite a bit. So let's get to the first part of this poem. So this was actually 9th century. This master was from 807 to 869. And it starts in this way. And this is from Master Sheng Infinite Mirror translation. In this very Dharma, the Buddha and the patriarchs secretly transmitted. Now that you have it, protect it well. And this is very, very important, because what he's saying is he's talking to you and presupposing you got it. Okay, through this, the patriarchs and the Buddha. And what was the first instant in the Buddha Dharma of this secret transmission? Anybody know? The first reference. This is an easy one.
Kashyapa.
Yeah, okay. Mahakasyapa and the twirling of the flower. So when the Buddha was twirling the flower, Kasyapa, later to become Mahakasyapa, meaning high, just acknowledged it. And it was mind to mind. And this is the establishment in terms of the Chan school of the understanding. There is this mind to mind connection. We don't understand it here. We go to school and we learn our stuff in the Chan school, but until one makes this kind of a connection, you don't know if that's real or not. But it is what Nagarjuna was talking about, and the sutra is talking about, is what is real. That's real. All of the other stuff is conditional, but the mind itself is immutable. It doesn't change. And because of that, there is this ability for the mind to be transmitted to others, not the individual, but mind to mind. And in that transmission, the truth is transmitted as to how everything works. And communications run on that level. A very good example of that was Vilamakritti and the Buddha, where Vilamakritti was feigning that he was ill, and then people were going to see him, and he kept putting in his mind, the Buddha hasn't sent anybody to see me. So they were communicating in this way, not because he was really sick, but because he wanted to lay out some Dharma. And he wanted to correct errors. And so the whole Vilamakritti Sutra is the first part where all of the Buddha's disciples who were corrected by Vilamakritti were reluctant to go, because they still had a sense of self. They still had the sense that this layperson was way over their ability. And so it's something that is pointing to getting it exactly right. Just like he said here, you can't be off by any amount. You got to get it exactly right. And that's what Vilamakritti was doing. And that's why the sutra was established, all of the wonderful Dharma. And if you haven't read that, take a couple of years to read it. You can read it in a very short time period, but take a couple of years to go over it and go back to it and go back and keep going at it, because it is in that way. Do you want to say something, Sandha?
Yes, a couple people are commenting. Tori, would you like to say something? Meena, would you like to say something? Raise your hand so that I can see you at the top.
All right, Tori.
Tori, one moment. I'll have to find her. One moment.
There you go.
I just look up the meaning of that. The Chinese characters for spacelessness, it actually means gapless. So something fits really tight, that it has no gap. And then the other two characters before spacelessness, it's going like penetrating, like it's so fine that it'll go through something without gap. So that's what those four characters mean. I just put it in the chat.
Well, yeah, I saw that, and thank you. Yeah, and again, that's kind of like what Red Pine's definition was of it, in terms of his commentary in the Heart Sutra of that. And he was talking about, it's not that there's a space between us, but a lack of space. And he's using that term, which is very, very good, because in mind, it's the opposite. When there's no gap between us, then there's no space. Even the space is intimate with mind. So it's kind of a different way that we look at things, versus from the idea of just samsara, and we're going into space. And then the scientists will tell you, well, actually space is a vacuum, right? There's nothing there. Well, it's space. There's something there, because because it is something. And actually, even in space, I'm sure Michael would tell you that there is matter in space, right? They weighed the universe. Very interesting. The astrophysicists weighed the universe. I don't know how they weighed it, okay, but they weighed it. And they realized it was like only like 50% the weight it should be for all of the things that were happening. And so then they realized that there is antimatter, the potentiality of matter that wasn't taken into account in weighing all of this. So even in space, if we look at it, and even the scientists, they'll pull out their hair trying to figure this out. I mean, look at Michael, you see, he's been working on this for a long time. Me too. I'm pulling out my hair on this, trying to figure it out. But it's interesting because we look at it from a different viewpoint. And so this kind of a thing, and Tori, where you say that things can go into another thing, is very interesting too. No. One day I'll tell you a story, but not today.
Thank you.
All right. Mina, go ahead. Get her. Okay, you're ready.
I was just looking up in the original text of 婆婆和和. It's a really meaningless word. It's really meaningless. I just put the original text there.
Okay, I guess that's why I couldn't Google it and find anything on it. And I kind of figured it was that way. Like I say, I kind of like that better than the Baba Wawa one. It just sounds more poetic. But thank you very much. Yeah, it's kind of like a meaningless phrase, just like a huato. Okay, we go on to the next. Oh, let me continue on with this part where he says, now that you have it, protect it well. Where have you heard me quote somebody saying that before? Anybody remember? Master Ling Chi. Master Ling Chi's always saying, now that you have it, protect it well. It wasn't his words. He was using these words, and actually maybe his words were there before this master, but those words are also show up in the sutras. I can't remember the ones, but it is something that's ancient in terms of talking about protecting this well, meaning that once you realize what mind is, you are mindful about protecting it. You're mindful about creating these so-called stains in the mind of using it in the wrong way, because it's very powerful. It's like the person that says, I'm going to get even with you if it's the last thing I do. And then they chase you into the next lifetime because it's very, very powerful. That's not protecting it well. That's abusing it. But when we use it and we protect it well, we find that this is an incredible key to unlocking the ability of removing suffering in the samsara. It's very, very important. It's not for you. It's for you to share with others, to pass on, to use this body to practice. Now we come to the part, and I still have a little bit of time left. I promised you Master Sheng would show up here somewhere. Like a silver bowl full of snow, or an egret hidden against a bright moon. They are similar, but not identical. When mingled, their difference can be recognized. Very interesting. It's saying like a silver bowl full of snow, or an egret hidden against the bright moon. Does anybody know what he's talking about? Nobody. Don't make me call on you guys. Nobody. Right now, five of the frames went dark. People are hiding in the corners. Mina shrank down further and further. He's talking about mind, but when he's talking about it, he's saying that this silver bowl full of snow. So if we had a silver bowl and we had the snow ultimately is clear. It shimmers and reflects. But is it the silver bowl? Which one holds which one? Does that give you a clue as to what they're talking about? And the egret against the moon. The moon, proverbially in Chinese culture, represents mind. And so we see the egret. I use the analogy of transparent fishes. And I thought that was a cool one until I realized there was a Chan poem already talking about transparent fishes late. But in any case, it's talking about this kind of a way of looking at things from the viewpoint of mind. So I want to, let me see, where did I do with it? This was from a kind of a lengthy thing called the Jewel Mirror Samadhi Translation Study, which is actually really, really good if you have a couple of years to study. But in this, and it goes from different translations and different people in terms of it, and their translations of it and their commentaries on this. And there's just a stellar group of masters and scholars and Buddhologists that's here. But I wanted to read you something. Here's from Master Sheng's commentary in this part. The mirror is our true self. It is precious because no matter how long it has been hidden, forgotten, and covered with dust, it never loses its power of illumination and reflection. And that's why when they were talking about at midnight, it shines, it never loses that illumination. The precious mirror is not an ordinary mirror. So the analogy must be stretched. An ordinary mirror has a finite shape and size, and it has sides and front and back. The precious mirror, however, has no boundaries. It cannot be defined in terms of shape and size. Samadhi refers to the power of the precious mirror, which manifests only when one attains the most profound level of samadhi. At this stage, all attachments fall away. The power that manifests is twofold. It benefits oneself by removing vexations, and it benefits others by helping them find their own precious mirror. This is the power of samadhi, of the precious mirror. And this is classic Master Sheng, talking about, okay, it's going to help you with your vexations, but more importantly, it's going to help you help others with their vexations and discovering their true identity. Several Buddhist works have been written in the form of songs and poems. A teaching written in verse is easily communicated to others. Verse helps the reader absorb the material quickly and thoroughly. How much time do I have? Okay. I'm just going to provide you some snippets of the commentary because this is going through each and every line, and there's probably I would say 12 masters and scholars that are commenting on this, from Suzuki to Master Sheng to even Japanese Zen masters. This is just a little snippet from somebody else on thus. The Buddha's admonition to Bahiya, then Bahiya, thus you must train yourself. In the seen, there will be just be the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the reflected, just the reflected. In the cognized, just the cognized. That is how you must train yourself. Now, when in the seen, there will be no you, just seen, just heard, just reflected, just cognized. Then Bahiya, you will not identify yourself with it. When you do not identify yourself with it, you will not locate yourself therein. When you do not locate yourself therein, it follows that you will have no here or beyond or midway between. And this would be the end of suffering. Tathata, suchness, central notion of Mahayana referring to the absolute, the true nature of all things, tathata, is generally explained as being immutable, immovable, beyond all concepts and distinctions. Suchness is the opposite of that which is apparent, phenomena. It is formless, unmade, the devoid of self-nature, tathata, as the thus being of things, and their non-duality is perceived through realization of the identity of the subject and the object in the awakening of the supreme enlightenment. Tathata is similar to the meaning Tathathagarbha, Buddha nature, Dharmakaya, Dharmata. And again, we've been talking about Dharmakaya quite a bit, so you can kind of plug that into what's being said here. We've got one more bit here. I wish I could read all of this to you because it's actually really, really good. Here's another note from Master Sheng, and this is in the line that we just read about the silver basin or the silver bowl and the snow and the egret and the moon. So in his commentary, Master Sheng says, these lines describe how the enlightened person sees the world. Ordinarily, we think that the mind of an enlightened person is unmoving. However, it cannot be said that there is no thought in his mind. So here we're saying that the enlightened person, their mind doesn't move, but it doesn't mean that they don't have thought. Even if we say Wu Nian, no thought, there's thought, but it's not thought in the way that we perceive things. It's the thought of the mind processing mind. The silver bowl and the bright moon are unmoving. They signify wisdom. The snow which is placed in the bowl is something moving in the sense that it is transitory. Remember, the snow in the bowl is phenomena. By containing the snow, the bowl manifests a function, namely to contain something. So if there was just snow, there would be nowhere, there would be nothing to support it. The only thing that supports that is the substance of mind itself, which is the bowl. It has to have something, as I'd mentioned to you before. You cannot project a movie into the sky and see anything. There has to be a screen, and that is mind itself, the noumenon. In a similar sense, the moon illuminates the egret. The snow and the egret symbolize phenomena. The snow and the bowl are the same color, but they are not the same things. The same is true for the egret and the moon. Enlightened beings see everything as one, but they can make distinctions. This is what's really important. We've got to look at this, because if not, it doesn't make sense. It can make distinctions. Sorry, this is really fine print. So at the end of the day, my eyes are trying to find where I was at. I can't point anymore. Okay. Snow in the silver bowl may be like phenomena exists, box and lid fit. And so when we're seeing this, essentially, when you understand this, you understand the function, and you also understand why Nagarjuna had to put it in terms of two truths: one, the phenomenal, and the other, the noumenon, or the apparent and absolute realities, and lay them out in a way where they're not two, they're not even one, they're just the thusness of mind. From this side, we see the snow and the bowl as separate. But in mind, there's no separation at all. There's no bowl and there's no snow. Those are conventions of the illusory mind that we use in order for us to traverse the idea of this illusory world and allow ourselves to experience mind unhindered. It is this experience of mind unhindered that produces the realizations and ultimately enlightenment. We cannot take ourselves with us. We cannot take any emotions with us. We cannot take anything. We don't need to. And they'll go, but what about, I feel for people. I love people. It's okay. You don't even have to bring your toothbrush, but what about all the people? It's okay, because where you're going, there's compassion. And so compassion is already there. You don't have to bring it with you. It's already part of the operating system is compassion. That's all you need. So just come, but don't try to squeeze through or sneak yourself in, because it's not going to work. You're just going to bounce off what the ancients called the steel wall, or the mountain side. You're just going to bang against it. You have to let that go. When you let that go, and you don't have fear, and you don't have confusion, you automatically get a pass into mind. It's not an all access pass. It's not complete enlightenment, but it's a realization. And little by little, you'll have other realizations in terms of things. And so you just put them down. When you have a realization, you just put it down. Don't think, oh, this is so special, or this is that. Because once you do that, then it impairs you from moving forward, because what mind does is gives you a little reveal of its nature, of the self nature. But that little reveal, even if it's just a sliver of a crack, it is like that sword that slices through the sky. Once that happens, once you realize that and you see that the sky is pierced by the sword, you'll know this world is not real. You may not be able to peek too much. You're maybe like the kid, you know, peeking under the tent, circus tent to see what he could see. You can't get too good of a view, but at least you know that there's something happening on the other side. And so the thing is that this is how we practice. If you practice in this way, this is mind work. And it will work. Okay. But this is how you study, how you prepare yourself by doing this. Okay. So keep up the good work. You know, I'm so happy to see you here, and I'll take your questions now.
While we wait for questions, Gilbert, so beautiful, this lecture. Thank you so much. So much appreciation. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I could tell that it was kind of hitting close to home for you, which is good. You know, sometimes it's just one of those that comes up, and I kind of called an audible at the last moment, and everything kind of fit together. Even though I'd been studying other things the whole week, then this one came through, and it worked really well. So sometimes it's just that way. I wanted to give you something, not just simply the mental thing, but to try to show how it relates to our practice. No questions tonight. You guys all understood this. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, so maybe like a specific question in the thing you read at last, this paragraph. It said, like, in one sentence, suchness is opposite to phenomena, and I found this a bit surprising, because I would have thought suchness embraces phenomena too. So I don't know.
What do you think? You know, it when you read things like that, you can bang your head against them just simply because you're hitting it from the idea of samsara. But when we say that suchness is opposite to it, it is just simply like saying not self. And you go, well, what does that mean? But the whole thing is that the suchness, and I knew that line was going to cause some consternation amongst people, but it is something that when we see that, it is because the phenomena takes itself to be real and takes itself to be via egocentrism and self-love, self-conceit. And the phenomena is an approach to define the world via the ego. But suchness is just this way, that ice or the snow in the bowl, there's no opposites there. There's no duality. There is just simply, it is the suchness of things. Even the opposite to phenomena is in the bowl, because that's that which clings to that is also in the bowl. So if you look deep into that bowl and you got to the edge of it and you peeked over and you kept looking like that, you'll slide right into that bowl and you'll melt just like the snow that's there. Just like Frosty the Snowman, you're just going to melt right into that bowl. And so that's the opposite, because that's what keeps everything going. Is there a bowl? the bowl, remember, is a metaphor for mind. There has to be a bowl, though, Christoph. There has to be a bowl, because if there is not the noumenon, then everything would be nihilistic, and there would be no purpose whatsoever to anything. There has to be that aspect of something appearing. Just think about it, even in common sense within samsara, something that appears has to be projected upon something. We've talked about that for several weeks now, about the projections on the mind, or projections on the mirror. And so that is there. But again, it has no form. It doesn't have the form of a bowl. And as they were talking about the mirror, and Master Sheng was talking about, it's not just like a two-dimensional mirror, one here and one here. It is this incredible mirror. And there was I'm trying to remember where it came from. For some reason, I've lost the source of it, where it is one kind of like an Indra's net, but it was the queen that was placed in a mirrored room, and it's kind of like that, except that you're not there. And once at night, I had this a sensation of being in this kind of an environment where there was not me, there's just mind and infinite out in all directions. There was no direction, no nothing. There was just this infiniteness of things, which is, I think, those kinds of experiences from the ancients prompted them to use this kind of an analogy to see things in this way, and infinite illumination. It's a product of my mind teaching me. It's not like the Buddha's teaching me, unless you say, well, the Buddha mind is teaching you, but it's just an experience. You don't cling to it. You just see it and you understand it, and from there, you can use it, but it helps you solidify your understanding of that kind of an analogy, and understanding, Christoph, that aspect has to be there. There is something there. It is the mind, but it's not created by the mind. It could not create itself. How it came about, nobody knows, but nevertheless, it's there. And so when we see things, we see them from a different viewpoint, from the viewpoint of mind itself. David.
As always, again, thank you for the presentation. Again, I sometimes wish I would have mind-to-mind transmission directly from you to be able to really begin to contemplate what is presented. But then, I don't mind actually just studying and trying to practice. But I wanted to ask, I was getting a little bit lost. Can you just briefly talk a little bit about compassion in this poem?
The compassion is the compassion of Sheng that wrote this. It's an invitation for you. It's a what would you call it? A kind of a whole, I'm losing the word for, when you put an electronical map there, whatever you call it, electronical map, circuit map, it's just in that way. It's just showing you how things are all connected, how things are working. And it's telling you this is the way. So the more that you work on it in this way, then it is in that way. No, it was interesting because I was reading from Master Sheng, and it may be in this one, or maybe in something else that I read today, how he talked about the master doesn't sit there and go over things. If you look at Hui Ning, how long did Hui Ning was taught by Master Hongren? Like a part of a night? That was the sum total of his teaching to him. Was just going over the Diamond Sutra. The masters, they don't do that. I mean, sometimes I indulge some of you because I talk to you guys in more detail. But part of that is to help you, and part of that is to lay down the practice of mind work in a clear way. But you cannot cling to anyone in terms of that, and then, or like Master Ling Chi says, don't hold the masters in high esteem. No, what you should do is aspire to reach that level, through diligent practice. So it isn't something that, believe me, David, if I could just go, okay, like I'll just touch the screen and there's you are, and boom, you've got it. Watch. Let's see. Stay tuned. This is something very important. Did you get it? Where's Eon? Is he still here? There he is. Mute him. What would the master say about that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Try again next week. All right, Shenta.
I was going to say the transmission is happening. David, it's happening. Don't miss it. Don't miss it.
The channel's open. You got it, like set up for your basic cable. So all you're getting is the Wheel of Fortune and hockey or whatever, you got to tune in a little deeper. You're right, Shanta. It is exactly there. You'll get it sometime. Before you punch out of here, you'll get it. Again,
don't look for it. Don't look for it in the words.
Again, it's Gilbert's money back guarantee. If you don't get it this lifetime, you'll come back next lifetime. So can't guarantee you're going to be a human next lifetime. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Lei Hui.
Hi, Gilbert. Thank you so much for today's lecture. The poem is very, very deep for me. And I'm just wondering if, especially when you talk about Master Shen Yan's translation of the mirror illuminating and not losing its or being hidden or lost. Is it talking about the Buddha nature?
Yes.
Is that the essence of this poem?
Yes. It's talking about the Buddha nature, and because the poem is all about the Buddha nature. It's talking, again, it's a signal from Mars, okay, back to Earth, like somebody who made it to Mars and is now broadcasting from there. And so we think that the signal's garbled, so we don't quite understand it, but it's just because we cannot know the language that he's speaking, because his language is esoteric. It's the hidden meaning. He's sending it. He's sending it to you. In due time, you will realize that. Okay, just stay with it. Just stay with it. Don't tune to the channels that David is going to. Okay, no. You try to I'm kidding them, but the whole thing is try your best. Okay, really try your best. It will come to you. Okay, cause and condition never fail. Okay, it will come to you. Any other questions?
We've got some comments on the chat.
Okay.
Robert, you wanna say it? Something? Do you want to say it?
The parrot's hiding now.
No?
Go ahead.
Sorry, okay,
Go ahead.
I'm here. Okay, the bird is here. First of all, I mean, I want to thank Gilbert for in the forum, the Mind Work Forum. You have been helping me a lot, and recently there's a few exchange that you guidance you gave me. So my question is, when the mind is at rest, I mean, really at rest, isn't that already a reflecting mirror? I mean, in fact, I don't even want to use the word mirror. Isn't that already reflecting? That's my question.
Its nature is this way. Its nature is this way. You know, when we talk about pratika samapada, cause and condition never fail, we just say this is the mind. So the mind, again, is the substance of all things that are created. Otherwise, the two truths of Nagarjuna would be false. But they can only be true if they lead to not to the one, but just to the thusness. And that's how it is. So the mind is always radiated. It's like the Indra's net, where every aspect of it is reflected everywhere else. There is nothing that's not connected into that net. Okay, but yeah, it's in just this way. But again, there is that function, you know, and that's why they point out what appears to be a duality, which is not a duality. It is just the function of mind, you know, with the snow and the egret. You know, those are good analogies to show noumenon and phenomenon. At this point, that study was well entrenched into the Chan practice, from all the sutras, including the Lanka Sutra. So yeah, it's in that way. Okay, anything else?
Celeste, would you like to come forward?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Gilbert, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, I've learned so much from all of you throughout this few months. And I had some thought for the past few days, and it was mainly this fine mind I can perceive that if I was me, a self, I'll be too filled for any occurrence to acquire. And then I got really confused after I understood my own thought. And then with today's session, I added a little bit, and I'm not sure if I am understanding what we have learned and what you have been sharing correctly or not.
It's okay to be confused, okay? It's better to be confused than to be certain about this world as being real. The process of this is something that sometimes it is, for instance, in the demonstration of the inconceivable state of Buddhahood Sutra, where Manjusri is telling Sariputra, because Sariputra was telling him, you know, aren't you confusing the novice with all this high talk? And he said, well, suppose you were sick. Would you take like a sweet candy and honey, or would you take the bitter medicine? And he says, of course I have to take the bitter medicine. How else would I be well? And it is in this way. You are a hero, what we call a bodhisattva warrior. All of you are, because you're challenging. You're here, and it's scary because I'm telling you that this is a dream. I'm telling you that things that confuse you, and yet you're still here. And trust that. Have faith in mind. Faith in the presenter. Faith in the Dharma. And faith in yourself. You will get there, just like Lei Hui. You have to have that faith. If you have it, it's okay. And it's okay to be confused. Okay. I mean, I'm confused all the time. I'm still a beginner. I still practice. I still look at this and try to say, how does this all fit? Where does compassion fit in all of this? Because if I can't look at those questions and see them, what good am I when people ask the questions? And so to me, I look at it and I want to probe these things. So that's what mind work is. It is a practice. If I could just pass that on to you like David wanted me to do to him, I could be very rich. I would charge like maybe $10,000 a hit like that, and then the people would be enlightened. But I'd have to have them sign a non-disclosure agreement as to that they cannot reveal how they got enlightened. Otherwise, he'll steal my clients. But it isn't in this way. It is in working it. It's working in an area where there's confusion. It's natural to be confused. So that's good. Okay. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Okay. Just hang in there. And little by little, it will become clearer. In the beginning, and I would venture to say, if you see any of the people here and they've listened to me for the first times, they were totally confused about what I was talking about. Now they're just confused, but not totally. But they're, they little by little, it comes to you. So don't worry, you're in the right place. Okay. Again, money back guarantee goes for you too. All right. I think that's probably, is there any one last one? Going. Yes, you are confusing, but okay. Well, that'll be it then for today. I'll have to think of something. You think this is like real easy for me to come up with a lecture that's provocative and profound and stuff. Believe me, it's not. It's something, but in any case, now I'm ready for my next function, which is just to go and get a bite to eat and feed this body. Okay.